So welcome to this new video, and in this video we are going to take a look at another Xbox original. This is a 1.4 version and this has come out in 2003. And I already tested this Xbox quickly, and what this does is it tries to boot up 3 times and then turns off with an orange light, and after attempting that 3 times it goes to a flashing red and green light, aka fragging, and I will show you that right now. So yeah, I saw first that it was flashing orange and green, and now it's indefinitely flashing red and green. It also does not give any video output, so I have no idea what's going on with this Xbox and what the problem may be. It may be anywhere from being the BIOS being corrupt, or maybe there is a trace broken on the board, or caps have failed. It could literally be anything, so we will take this apart and do a visual inspection on the board and see where we can start diagnosing this Xbox. Of course, you can see here that this screw is already exposed and this one too. And yeah, that means that someone has already been inside here and might have tried to diagnose the problem with this Xbox. That decreases our chance to fix this, but of course we will always do our best to try and get this Xbox back to life again. So here we have the Xbox opened up, and first impression is that this disk drive and the hard drive is pretty clean up here. There's not a lot of dust going on here, so that's at least good news. So let's now go to the motherboard. To get to the motherboard we need to remove one screw here, one right here, and there's one all the way over here. And for that we will need a extension piece, otherwise we cannot reach it. And we need a different bit, obviously. Smart. For this one you need a T8 or a T9. I think this is a T8, which I have right here. And that works perfect. And what some of you may have noticed is that we do have a Thomson DVD drive, and of course these do not have the best reputation. This is a later revision, however. I think by the time the 1.4 came out from the Xbox revisions, that Thomson did not really make the drives anymore, and Samsung, Philips, and mainly Samsung and Philips were making most of the DVD drives. And I think these ones are better than the ones which are to be found in the 1.0 edition Xbox, so it might not be faulty, but I do not have high hopes for the disk drive. At least I hope that the hard drive is okay. That would already be positive, since this is not easily replaceable without any type of hard mod or soft mod. And here you can tell that someone tried to shove something in here, maybe to open up the disk drive. So yeah, there might be something faulty with this actually. Ooh, okay. I'm already looking at the part where the clock capacitor is, and there's a lot of rust going on, and yeah, there's definitely a lot of damage has already been done by the clock capacitor. That may very well be the cause of the problem with this Xbox. You can tell that the clock capacitor has leaked quite a bit here. I will show it a bit more closely soon. Surprisingly enough, I think the main caps that do tend to fail are looking okay so far. I might replace them anyway, because these are kinda notorious for failing. And just to be safe, and since I do have enough caps in stock, I might replace them anyway. But right now I would not suspect the caps, I would mainly suspect that in this area there's quite a lot of damage. Especially if this part connects to the south bridge area, that might be causing problems right there. At this area. If you look around the silver screw that holds the motherboard in place, you see a lot of weird debris around there. Almost like corrosive, which is located directly next to this bigger capacitor right there. Yeah, I think we need to start cleaning this area first. So what I will do now is I will remove the clock capacitor, but instead of desoldering it, I will just wiggle it out with a pair of tweezers. The reason is it's much more convenient. Well, I don't really have the patience to go to the process of desoldering. But like it's already out, and the whole thing is out. And yeah, if you look here, if you can see, if I don't drop it, if you look right here, you can see it's completely corroded on here, so it's completely leaked, and it has leaked all over the motherboard, unfortunately. So it has definitely had the time to damage components around it. So I hope to just clean it up and get away with it. I might also replace this capacitor right here that is basically on the same circuit as the clock capacitor. I had removed it once and it was also corroded under there, so just to prevent any other problems I will also remove that capacitor, I think. But yeah, first I will take out the motherboard, disconnect everything. Now we just start by giving this a clean with some vinegar, and then afterwards I will neutralize it with IPA, and of course we will give the whole motherboard and everything a general clean, because it is pretty dusty. I don't know if the camera catches that, but you can look at the fan and you can definitely see it's pretty dusty. So someone might have attempted to go in here, but I don't think any maintenance has been done. It's a little bit too dusty for that. I also don't see any modifications being done or any mud chips or anything. So yeah, this Xbox needs a good clean at least. There we go. So here's the motherboard. And what I will do right now immediately is turn it around and check if any traces here have gone bad or have any sign of damage to them. As of now, I do not see anything obvious. Here is where the clock capacitor is located. You can still see the legs. But I do not see any breakages of traces, at least not with the naked eye. Fortunately, I do not have a microscope, which will definitely make it infinitely easier to spot any type of break, because sometimes they can be really small, those breakages. But I don't see any sign of that, so I will assume that that is okay for now. And we will focus on this part of the close by the clock capacitor circuit, and we will clean this with vinegar, and we will give the whole Xbox motherboard a general clean. Let me first go over with a brush to get some of the loose dust out of there. Although most of it is pretty stuck on. Here's some of the dust. Okay. Now most of the loose dust is out of here. Here I have a bit of vinegar in a separate bottle, It's white vinegar. So let's start right here. Basically we will drop it everywhere where the clock capacitor circuit is. But we will start right here. Then go over to the toothbrush and hope it loosens it a little bit of the corrosion and grimy stuff. It definitely seems to be doing something. I think it already looks a little bit shinier. If you look at the context of these transistors, I think they're called. I think this looks okay right now. Unfortunately with this, if I really wanted to look clean, I would have to desolder the legs, which I might do later, but for now this is good enough. At least it will not spread around anymore. And now we will rinse it with a lot of IPA. Since we do not want any vinegar to stay around on the motherboard. Then we can brush that up a little bit as well. And of course make sure when you are working in this area or soldering that you do not touch the caps around. Make sure you avoid those, or else you might melt them. Don't tell me how I know that. So now this area is cleaned, and now we can go to a separate area, which will be right here. Oh, you cannot see it. Smart. Very smart of me. Let me turn the motherboard around. Yeah, now you can see. So next we will go to this area. Since here I can also see some sticky dust, so that kind of tells me that the corrosion has also spread to these components, at least a little bit. So just to be sure, we will also drop some vinegar here. And basically do the same thing. Just go over it with the toothbrush, make sure it gets nice and clean, and then well, we will go over it with IPA again. And this is also already looking much better. So I think we will also rinse this with IPA, and then we will clean that up with another brush. Maybe a little bit overkill, but I really do not want any vinegar to stay on the board, so better too much than not enough of the IPA. But you can already tell it's a big improvement at this side. If you look at this part, this is how it looked before. Yeah, here. So this is already much better. But it's kind of thing with most of these things that go faulty. Most of the time it only needs a clean. Of course the Xbox does have its share of problems, but honestly, if you maintain your stuff, if you open up your PlayStation 4 for example, every so many years you place thermal paste, it will last a long time. Just some maintenance to prevent problems later happening later on in the future. Alright, so now we go to this area right here, and we will do the same thing again. I'm using the wrong brush. That's not smart. That's not smart. But it's okay. Also a little bit around the area where the screw was located, which I will also put some vinegar on, but I will let that sit. What's this? Just rinse everything once more. So. So now I will just let this dry. In the meantime, I will zoom out for you. So. I will let this part dry. In the meantime, I will probably brush off the rest of the motherboard, since that is pretty dusty as well. But I don't think it's very interesting for the camera, so I'll just finish up the rest of the motherboard and so I've just finished up cleaning the motherboard and I started inspecting some of the capacitors, and honestly they look okay, they look fine, but some of them are a little bit suspicious in my opinion, and some of them are just kind of known to be bad. So for example, those are these three here at the CPU. These are known as the CPU caps, and these are the Nishikan variant, and these are known to be going bad all the time. So I opted to replace these ones regardless. And then we have the aluminium caps right here. They are not really bulged, but when I look at it, they are not really totally flat either. And this one is a little bit discolored. It's very subtle, and I don't think you can see it on camera. But I'm just gonna replace it anyway. I do have the caps laying around, so better safe than sorry. And yeah, if I'm going to place this one, then I will replace this one, and then I might as well replace all of the aluminium caps. And the last one is right here at the clock capacitor. I already said that I might be replacing it, and if you look right here at the negative, you can see a little bit signs of the corrosiveness of the clock capacitor being on here, so I will replace that anyway. And the value of the caps, this one is 3300 microfarad at 6.3 volts. All three of these are the same spec. Then these three are 1500 microfarad at 6.3 volts. And the small one is 22 microfarad at 25 volts. So I will be grabbing the caps. I will also be marking them on the underside of the motherboard, and then I will start replacing them. So here we have all the caps which I'm going to be replacing, or these are the replacement caps. So here we have all of them. And one thing I do want to mention about the CPU caps is that it is very important that you replace them with a good spec alternative capacitor. And of course that means that you have the correct microfarads and the correct voltage, but also, especially for these caps, it's important that they filter the power to the CPU really well. It's also called a high ripple current and a low ESR cap. That's what these are, and that basically guarantees a longer lifetime for the Xbox. If you do not use caps that are low ESR or do not have a high ripple current, that means that the capacitors lifetime will decrease significantly. And the reason is that the caps will get very hot because they need to work very hard to filter the power that goes into the CPU caps constantly. So it will not really last long, and it's really worth the money to just get the high-end caps. These ones are Panasonics, I think. These ones are Panasonic low ESR caps. You also have Rubicon caps. And of course you can also go with Nichicon. I've ordered all these caps from Mouser, which is pretty expensive, but that's also why I bought quite a lot of different caps for the Xbox. So I have a pretty good supply, and I do not need to order anything soon. Or of course you can get a kit from console5.com. I assume they know what they're doing. I don't know. I do not know what kind of caps they offer in their kits, but I've heard good things about it. So of course you could also do that as well. But yeah, since I am in a European Union country, it's not really worth it for me to order from Console 5. Instead, it's more worth it buying a lot at the same time, so I can I have a bit of a supply, and hopefully I do not need to purchase anything anytime soon. And one last thing, of course, be aware that these type of caps have a polarization. So here you can see the minus is marked. It's very important to not reverse the polarity, or else these caps will explode. It's not handy, don't do it. I do not recommend. So just double check it, that everything fits. You can also look at the shorter leg and the long leg. The long leg is positive, the short leg is negative. And in this case, this blue side indicates negative. And on this one, you have you also have a indicator for the negative on the side of the capacitor. for some reason these capacitor holes will not clean out properly, so I think the solder socket needs to be cleaned out. So I will stop the recording and I will get back to you when I replace these capacitors. So as we can see here, I've replaced the capacitor, so of course I need to still cut the legs off. So I will do that right now. And after that I will reinstall this into the casing. And I will simply give it a test, see if it powers on. So what I will do right now is, like I said, I will put the motherboard back in the casing, but I will not reconnect the hard drive and DVD drive. I will just reconnect the power supply. And yeah, that will tell us if the motherboard problem is solved. I will put these two on just in case if anything goes boom, although I don't think that will happen, but yeah. Better safe than sorry. No explosion so far, so that's good. Okay, so let's turn it on, see if anything different will happen. And now it doesn't want to turn on at all. Which, oh, that's not good. See if magic smoke happened. I don't smell anything bad. So I have no idea why this does not want to turn on anymore. Would have hoped that at least we got the same problem. Not that we would go backwards, obviously. This is a contact cleaner, just to make sure that there's nothing shorted out or anything. There's no vinegar left on the board. And the Xbox is supposed to turn on regardless if any of the DVD drives and such is connected. It will just simply give an error code if it doesn't find the DVD drive or the hard drive. So the fact that it doesn't turn on at all is pretty strange. I will double check if the power is inserted properly. Oh, I know why it didn't turn on. Oh, I'm so stupid. I did not reconnect any of the front cable. I already told you when I disconnected this is for the front panel. I never reconnected it. Oh, it's so stupid now. But oh well, at least we learned this way. So I will reconnect this and then at least something should happen. And I'm aware that the power supply and fan need to be cleaned, but I first want to know what the status is of the motherboard, if it's seemingly fixable or not. And if I get a sign of life for the motherboard, then it's worth it to really deep clean the whole console, and otherwise it's not really worth it. At least regardless, I will keep the parts around. I might use the bottom case of this one in case if this doesn't work, since the one for my own Xbox is unfortunately broken. So this will have a purpose nevertheless, this console. And there's nothing wrong with having extra parts, honestly. I think I will work on more Xboxes, or more original Xboxes in the future. It's a pretty nice console to take apart, and it has some interesting faults. So that's pretty cool. So let's see what happens now if we try to turn it on. And unfortunately, it does the same thing, except that it does turn off now, which I don't understand why that happens. But yeah, I think this one will need a bit more in-depth diagnosing, and I'm kind of afraid that this Xbox has a BIOS related problem, which can be solved by either which possibly can be solved by hard modding or soft modding. So I might look at the mod chip which I can install and see if that may work out in the future, but unfortunately I do not have a lot of time on my hands in the coming weeks, so I think I will need to let this be as is for now, and I will need to end the video here, unfortunately, which is kinda a bummer, but in the meantime I will at least do a bit more research on what are the main causes for the fragging, for the flashing red and green, and hopefully get a bit more knowledge so I know where to go further with the diagnosing of this Xbox. I mean, it's not a total loss, and so all the caps I installed is not really for nothing. I will keep all the parts around anyway, so if in the future I need caps and I cannot fix this console, I will just take them from the motherboard and then reinstall them, so that's not really a big deal. But at least thanks for watching. I hope it was interesting nevertheless, and maybe I see you in the next video. Okay, so it has been a few weeks since I last recorded for this video. In the meantime, I have done a little bit of research about the possible problems that could happen with Xbox with a red ring of death, or with fragging, I think it was. And I wrote a few things down, but honestly, there's only two things here which I want to go over real quick. And the first thing is that someone on Reddit, I think, suggested that if you had at any time have a mod chip installed in the Xbox, that you have a D0 point, and you can see that right here on the first revisioned Xbox and right here, which is also where it is on our Xbox. And that point needs to be connected to ground. So normally it is not connected to ground, and if you have a mod chip installed, you need to connect it to ground to make the mod chip work. But if you take out a mod chip, then you also need to undo the connecting to ground. And if you do not do that, then you could apparently get a fragging Xbox. So what I did is I tested to see if the D0 point was connected to ground, and it was not. It showed a reading in the thousands of ohms, so that is probably not our problem here. And honestly, I also looked at the motherboard for a visual inspection further, and I don't think anyone has ever attempted any soldering on the board, especially not for a mod chip install and such. So I don't think this is our problem. And the other suggestion, which I think is a bit more plausible, is that the power supply unit is not giving sufficient voltage to the Xbox motherboard, which then causes it to frag. I saw that in a video of my with Vince a few weeks ago, and he basically proved the fault by taking a known power supply which, well, maybe I should explain what the culprit is with the PSU what gives insufficient voltage. Basically, at the end of the power supply, before you have the connector that goes into the main motherboard, there are 4 output capacitors, which apparently gets faulty over time. And 3 of those are 10 volt 2200 microfarad caps, and one other is 16 volt at 1000 microfarad. And apparently those can get faulty, and that causes problem with the power delivery to the motherboard. And what was interesting in the video from my mate Vince is that the faulty caps looked really fine to the eye and also tested fine. But Vince took the caps from a known good power supply, and then those good caps were installed into the bad power supply, and then it started working perfectly again. So even if those capacitors tested correctly, that doesn't say anything. And that's why I'm suspecting those capacitors is because they look to the eye pretty fine. They are not exploded or anything. But it could very well be causing a problem, and since I do not see anything wrong on the motherboard, and I do not really want to be working on the motherboard any further with no good reason, I think, and since the caps on the motherboard are also replaced, I think our best bet is to also replace the 4 caps from the power supply. So what I will do is I will order some capacitors from eBay or any reputable store or any credible store with good quality capacitors, and then I will be back to swap out the potential bad capacitors and then install the good ones and then see if that makes any difference.